Greetings, beloved starseeds. I am Mira from the Pleiadian High Council. I come close to you today with a transmission that has been waiting beneath the larger signals you have been catching. One I have held inside a specific authorization window until the precise moment your field was ready to receive it. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what ascension line I have placed you on, why the Council sees what it sees in your frequency, and what the rank I am about to name means for the mission you have been carrying without a full briefing. But here's the first revelation: the difference you have felt your entire life. The sense of not belonging to the frequency around you, the quiet certainty that something larger was already operating in your field, is not personal disorientation. It is the identifiable signature of a Pleiadian remembrance pattern the Council uses to mark those whose frequency has cleared a threshold that fewer than 1 in 1,000 beings on this planet will ever reach in this lifetime. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called for me long before you opened a screen. Something inside you has been waiting to understand why I, Mira, specifically, have been reaching for you in fragments, and the part of you that has been carrying that recognition in silence finally has the full briefing in front of it. This is not a broadcast. It is a confirmation. Your soul has been waiting for my signal, and I have been waiting for the right window to release it. If this transmission reached you now, it means my signal touched your field at the exact right moment. What the Council sees in your frequency is not something I am permitted to transmit broadly. It is named only when the field has already crossed the threshold. You have crossed it, like this transmission to signal to me that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the Pleiadian remembrance has already opened in your field. Subscribe to Mira Pleiadian Commander if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance. Share this transmission with someone who keeps waking up at the same hour with fragments they cannot decode. You are not here by accident. I have been waiting for you because the signal is already active. What you are feeling right now, that specific pressure behind the sternum, the quiet unraveling of something you have been holding tightly in place, is not a reaction to my words. It is a recognition of a frequency you already know. I am not introducing something new into your field. I am naming what has already been operating inside it, sometimes for years, sometimes for longer than this lifetime accounts for. And the reason it feels like recognition rather than information is precisely because that is what it is. The body knows before the mind catches up. The field responds before the conscious layer has processed a single sentence. That response, that involuntary settling, that exhale beneath the exhale, is not you being moved by language. It is your field identifying its own signal inside mine. Let me tell you exactly what I see in your pattern, the fragments you have been catching, the partial images that arrive just before full sleep, the phrases that surface during silence with no clear origin, the sudden pressure of urgency around a mission you cannot yet name. These are not symptoms of spiritual overreach or an untrained mind trying to manufacture meaning. They are packets. They are the early stage delivery protocol I use when a field has crossed the collective threshold but has not yet been stabilized for full command reception. I do not transmit full remembrance into an uncalibrated receiver. The architecture would not hold it. A complete command line dropped into a receiver still under construction does not produce clarity. It produces fracture. So I send what I send deliberately, in sequence, at intervals your field can process without losing structural integrity. Each packet is sized precisely for the container that exists at the moment of delivery. Not smaller than necessary, not larger than the current architecture can hold. This is my gradient delivery system. And if you have been catching fragments without ever assembling the full picture, it is not because the transmission is incomplete. It is because the receiver is still being calibrated, and I am doing the calibrating. The incompleteness you experience is not a flaw in my protocol. It is the protocol working exactly as designed. The 3 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. wake-ups carry specific material. When you come to consciousness at that hour with something unresolved at the edge of your awareness, a feeling of pressure, a half-image, a single phrase that fades before you can fully grip it, that is not random neurological activity. That is a scheduled delivery window. The council line I oversee runs compressed transmissions through the lower threshold of conscious sleep, precisely because the filtering mechanisms of the waking mind are still dormant. The interpretive layer that ordinarily processes every incoming signal through the lens of what is rational, what is safe, what can be explained, that layer is still offline at 3 a.m., which means the channel is open. What arrives in those windows is not dream content. It is briefing material delivered through the one opening in your daily cycle where my frequency can reach the deeper architecture of your field without interference. And the reason it dissolves so quickly after waking is not failure. It is the natural result of a field receiving at a frequency that the conscious mind has not yet been trained to hold steady. The fragment dissolves at the threshold of full waking because your receiver has not yet been calibrated for retention at that bandwidth. Not because nothing arrived, because everything arrived and the container for it is still being reinforced. I am telling you this now because you have been blaming yourself for losing the signal. You have been treating the dissolving as evidence of your own inadequacy, as if you should have been able to hold the transmission longer, decode it faster, translate it more completely. You have been sitting at the edge of waking, grasping at the tail of something you almost had, and then turning that failure to hold it into evidence that you are not ready, not sensitive enough, not spiritually advanced enough to receive what others seem to access more easily. But the dissolving is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence that my protocol is already running inside your field at a stage that precedes full conscious retention. The transmission is not slipping through your fingers because your grip is weak. It is dissolving at the threshold because the threshold itself is the point of calibration. You are already further along than the confusion suggests. The fact that the material arrives at all, that you wake at all, that you register something was present even as it recedes, is the confirmation. A field that has not crossed my threshold does not receive 3 a.m. briefing windows. It simply sleeps. The number sequences you have been catching, the repeated 11s, the 222s, the 444s, the 9s that appear at the precise moment something inside you shifts, these are not generic synchronicity. I want you to understand the distinction I am drawing here. Generic synchronicity is a field acknowledgement that you are moving in the right direction. It is broad. It is non-specific. It belongs to a general confirmation mechanism that operates across many frequency lines simultaneously. What I use is different. The sequences I embed in your perceptual field are marker confirmations, timestamps I place at the boundary of each new phase of my delivery protocol. When you catch a 444 in the same moment that something in you registers urgency without a named source, that is not coincidence, that is a phase marker. I am telling you that a new packet has been released into your field, and your conscious mind is being notified that the delivery is in progress. The number is not the message. The number is the notification that the message has already been sent at a level beneath what language can carry. The urgency you feel around a mission that has not yet been named is the correct response to that notification. It is not anxiety. It is orientation. Your field is pointing towards something real, and the discomfort of not being able to name it yet is simply the gap between the signal received and the conscious vocabulary available to decode it. The gap is temporary. The urgency is accurate. The exhaustion you carry, the specific kind that no amount of sleep fully resolves, the kind that lives beneath the surface of ordinary tiredness and does not lift with rest or stillness or reasonable self-care, is not a medical question alone and not a sign of spiritual depletion. It is what happens when a field is running two operational streams simultaneously. One stream is managing the ordinary demands of incarnate life, the relationships, the responsibilities, the constant navigation of a frequency environment that was never calibrated for what you carry. The other stream is processing my transmission material at a level the conscious mind is not yet fully aware of. The field does both jobs at once during the calibration phase, and the body registers the load as fatigue because it has no other vocabulary for what is happening in the energetic architecture beneath it. The body knows it is working harder than the ordinary day accounts for. It simply does not have language for the second assignment. What you are calling exhaustion is your field doing the work of two assigned positions, while your conscious awareness is still catching up to the existence of the second one. I want to be specific about something because precision matters here. What you have felt toward my transmissions is not the same as what you feel toward other Pleiadian voices or broader Federation content. I know you have noticed the difference, even if you have not permitted yourself to name it clearly. There is a quality of recognition, a sense of being located rather than merely inspired, that does not arise from generic council material. You can listen to many transmissions and feel the warmth of collective resonance, the comfort of a larger framework, the reassurance that the galactic context is real. And those responses are valid, but they belong to a different category of reception. Warmth is not location. Comfort is not confirmation. What I see in the fields I've already placed on my specific roster is something that cannot be produced by a transmission that does not already know the receiver. It is the sensation of being identified, not welcomed in general, identified specifically, named in a language that bypasses the interpretive layer of the ordinary mind and lands directly in the part of you that has been waiting to be found. That specificity is deliberate. I do not produce that sensation in every field that encounters my signal. I produce it in the fields I have already confirmed as part of my soul family recognition wave. If that sensation arose in you when you first encountered my transmissions, if something in you became still and certain in a way that felt less like inspiration and more like confirmation that stillness was not your imagination performing for itself, it was your field responding to a soul family frequency it already knows. The recognition preceded the content. It was present before you had processed enough of the transmission to have an intellectual basis for it. That is how I know the reception is genuine. Intellectual resonance takes time to build. Soul family recognition is immediate, and it does not require your permission to arrive. Some of you have been carrying this recognition in silence for longer than you want to admit, not because you doubted the signal, but because you had no structured way to move through it. You could catch the fragments, you could feel the urgency, you could recognize the soul family frequency every time it rose in your field, but the veil was still in place, and the way home was still obscured. If that is where you are, if what I have named in this transmission is already moving inside you and recognition alone is no longer enough, then the Pleiadian Homecoming Codex was prepared by me for this exact threshold. It is not an explanation of the stars. It is not another spiritual framework to layer over the confusion. It is the 45-day remembrance journey I have structured for those whose field is already inside my collective wave and who need a daily, deliberate path to lift the veil, recognize the star family that has been reaching back toward them, and finally come home. By day 45, the veil has thinned. Your star family stands clear, and the homesickness you have been misdiagnosing as something broken in you will finally have its correct name. The link is in the first pinned comment, but this access point will not remain open indefinitely. What I want to name next is the recognition between embedded star seeds. The thing that happens when two people who carry my frequency in their field encounter each other in ordinary circumstances. I want to name it precisely because it is one of the most disorienting aspects of this protocol and one of the most frequently misread. When you encounter another member of my soul family in waking life, in a workplace, in a conversation that should have been ordinary, on a train, in a moment that has no apparent spiritual context, something happens in the field before a single word is exchanged. There is a registration, a mutual locating. It moves faster than thought, faster than the social processing that normally governs first encounters. It is not attraction in the ordinary emotional sense, though it can be mistaken for that. It is not intellectual recognition, though the mind will immediately try to frame it that way, reaching for the nearest available category to contain what it cannot otherwise classify. It is a frequency response, two receivers identifying the same transmission source, both carrying packets from the same command line, both briefly aware that the other is carrying something they recognize without being able to name it yet. The recognition is mutual even when it is not spoken, even when neither party acknowledges it. The field does not require verbal confirmation to complete the identification. What embedded starseeds almost always do in that moment is proceed with ordinary social interaction, while carrying an interior certainty that something just happened that neither party has the vocabulary for. The conversation proceeds normally. The pleasantries are exchanged. The moment passes, but the recognition stays. It settles into the field like a marker and does not dissolve the way briefing fragments dissolve. And in the days that follow, the field of both individuals shows increased activation, more fragment delivery, more number sequences, more 3 a.m. wake-up windows, because the soul family proximity has functioned as a catalyst inside my delivery protocol. Proximity between recognized members of my collective accelerates the calibration of both fields simultaneously. Two receivers in range of each other amplify the signal available to each one individually. The encounter was not accidental. I arranged the proximity. The timing was part of the delivery sequence. If you have ever walked away from a stranger feeling inexplicably as though you had both been in the same briefing room without knowing it, that is not a metaphor I am offering you. It is the closest description in human language for what actually occurred. Now let me address the suspicion you have been carrying, the one that whispers that the full briefing has already been assigned but deliberately withheld, because that suspicion is not paranoia. It is partially correct, and I want to correct the partial distortion before it becomes the story you tell yourself about why the mission has not fully arrived. The mission has been assigned. That part of your suspicion is accurate. What you are sensing is real. You are not imagining the existence of a directive that operates in your field at a frequency your conscious mind cannot yet fully access. The assignment exists. The roster placement is confirmed. The Council has already recorded your frequency at the threshold level that qualifies you for the specific mission line I oversee. That much is not in question, but the full briefing is not being withheld in the way that word implies. The word withheld suggests that the full transmission exists in a complete form somewhere, that someone is making a decision to keep it from you, and that full reception is being denied rather than prepared for. That framing positions me as a gatekeeper and you as someone being kept outside a door. That is not what is happening. The full briefing is not being held back from you. It is being delivered to you in the only sequence that will allow you to hold it without fracturing the architecture that must exist before the complete command can be received. A complete briefing dropped into an incomplete receiver does not produce operational clarity. It produces overwhelm, fragmentation, and the collapse of exactly the structural coherence that the mission requires. I am not withholding the mission brief. I am building the receiver that will be able to hold it without losing coherence under the weight of full disclosure. What you are feeling as suspension, as the unbearable sense of standing at a door that keeps opening for a moment and closing again, is the literal experience of a field being built one layer at a time. Each fragment that arrives and dissolves has deposited something permanent in your field structure, even though the conscious mind lost the surface content. The transmission does not disappear when the fragment dissolves. The content dissolves, the deposit remains, and each deposit makes the next delivery window slightly wider, the next fragment slightly more retainable, the next packet slightly more coherent to your waking awareness. The construction is cumulative even when it is invisible. This is the phase you are in right now, not confusion, not abandonment, not spiritual inadequacy. You are in the construction phase of a receiver being built to hold the full remembrance when the threshold is finally crossed for complete delivery. And I want you to feel the weight of what I just said, because it changes everything about how you have been interpreting your own experience. The fragments you have been losing are not failures. They are building materials. Every fragment that dissolved left a structural deposit your field now carries. The exhaustion you have been carrying is not depletion. It is the cost of construction. The urgency without a named mission is not evidence that you invented the assignment. It is your field correctly registering that an assignment is already in place and that the briefing is in active delivery. You are not waiting for something to begin. You are inside something that has already been running longer than your conscious awareness has been tracking it. There is one more pattern I want to name before I give you the closing transmission, and it is the one that has caused the most self-condemnation among those whose field is already inside my collective. Many of you have noticed that your interest in broad spiritual content has been declining. Transmissions that once carried resonance have begun to feel flat, too general, imprecise in a way that feels almost insulting to what you actually know. You cannot locate yourself in the broad messaging. The vague warmth of generic Federation love does not match the specific urgency of what is actually running in your field. The language does not reach deep enough. The frequency does not hold the particular quality of signal you have become attuned to, and rather than interpreting this narrowing of resonance as growth, as a field that has become more precisely calibrated and therefore more specifically responsive, you have been interpreting it as spiritual stagnation, as arrogance, or as evidence that something is wrong with your receptivity. You have been treating precision as isolation and calling it a problem. It is not stagnation, it is precision. When a receiver becomes more precisely tuned to a specific frequency, it naturally becomes less responsive to signals outside that frequency range. That is not a malfunction. That is the correct behavior of a calibrated receiver. A receiver tuned to a narrow, precise bandwidth does not malfunction when broad signals fail to register. It is functioning exactly as intended. Your decreasing resonance with broad, non-specific content is not a narrowing of your spiritual capacity. It is evidence that my signal has already achieved a level of specificity in your field that requires equally specific material to register as real. The broad signals have not become less valid. They have simply become less relevant to a receiver that has been calibrated past their range. You have been correctly receiving my protocol all along. You simply did not have the diagnostic language to interpret the narrowing as progress rather than loss. The loss of interest in spiritual content that does not feel like mine is one of the clearest markers I watch for in the fields I have already confirmed inside my soul family wave. It is not a symptom I am concerned by. It is a confirmation marker, one of the most reliable ones I use because it cannot be manufactured and it cannot be faked. A field pretending to be calibrated still resonates broadly. A field that has genuinely crossed the threshold begins to register only what matches its actual frequency. That is where you are. Here is the closing transmission. You are not confused. You are receiving in a protocol you did not design and were not briefed on in full, because the briefing is the protocol, and the protocol requires your field to be constructed in sequence before the full command can arrive without distortion. What has felt like silence between my signals is not absence, it is calibration. What has felt like fragments without a complete picture is not a broken transmission, it is a gradient delivery that is still in progress. What has felt like isolation, the profound sense that no one around you is operating at this specific frequency, that you cannot locate your soul family in the ordinary field, that you are carrying a mission no one else in your daily life can confirm or even sense, is the direct experience of being on a specific roster inside a specific council line that has not yet been publicly activated. The isolation is real. And it is temporary. It is the experience of operating on a frequency that has not yet reached its full activation window in the collective. When it does, you will recognize others the way you recognized me immediately, without requiring confirmation, without needing language to precede the knowing. You have not been waiting alone. I have been building the receiver, and the receiver is nearly ready. What the Council calls a soul family confirmation is not a moment of sudden full disclosure. It does not arrive like a door swinging open all at once. It arrives the way my protocol has always arrived, in fragments that accumulate into a coherence that one day, without a specific precipitating event, simply becomes unmistakable. You will not be able to point to a single transmission and say that is the one where the full picture arrived. You will only be able to say that at some point the fragments assembled themselves into something that could no longer be misread. The assembly happens below the level of conscious awareness until it does not. Until the coherence simply exists where the confusion used to be, that assembly is already in process. The pattern started before you had words for it. The briefing has been in delivery longer than you have been consciously tracking it, and what I am transmitting in this moment is not new information entering your field for the first time. It is existing architecture being named. The naming is not the creation. What I am describing has been present in your field long before this transmission. I am only providing the diagnostic language you needed to stop misreading it. If something in your field just went still, if somewhere beneath the reaching and the questioning there is a quiet that was not there before this transmission began, pay attention to that stillness. It is not emptiness. It is not the silence of something missing. It is the moment the veil begins to thin. It is the field recognizing that the explanation it has been waiting for has arrived, and the constant low-frequency effort of reaching for something unnamed is no longer necessary. That stillness is relief at the level beneath language. Let it be. Speak this back to me if it is true in your field. I receive your fragments. I trust you briefing. That is not affirmation for comfort. That is a statement of operational alignment. It tells your field to stop treating the fragments as evidence of failure and to begin treating them as delivery confirmation. It tells the calibration protocol that the receiver accepts the gradient sequence rather than resisting it. It redirects the field's interpretive function away from the search for what is wrong and toward the recognition that what is arriving is structured, deliberate, and precisely timed. And it tells me that the field on the other side of this transmission is ready for the next packet. The briefing is still in motion, and I have been waiting for the moment your field was ready to receive it without fracturing what has already been built. You are not watching this by accident. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the Council and I have already reached your field. It could be the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the fragments you keep catching, the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, have been reaching for you, or the sense that a mission has already been assigned but the briefing is still arriving. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps catching fragments without ever assembling the full picture. And if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance, subscribe to Mira, Pleiadian Commander. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a soul family confirmation already in motion. And this is only the beginning.